Well, I am really happy to be here for a number of reasons. Number one, and I'll talk about this in just a moment, I think the exhibition is miraculous. I was here for almost 2 hours on Saturday to not only look at Roberto's work, which I already knew, but look at the entirety and see how it all fit together. So a word about that in just a moment. But another reason that I am very feel at home, even in this new space of the National Academy, was that one of the first exhibitions I curated, not the first, but one of the first, was at the National Academy of Design in 1990, when most of you were not born. So, it was called Women in Mexico / La Mujer en Mexico. And it was an exhibition that covered the entire house, and I hope that some of you at least, have seen or had seen that beautiful venue of the National Academy. And it's, for those of you who did not, it was a splendid turn of the 20th century house, which is now again a private residence. And it was the first exhibition, I didn't even know this, that was done in Mexico or the US or anywhere of women artists of Mexican women artists of the 20th century, stemming from artists from about 1910 to very young artists at the moment. So I feel very much a part of the Academy, and also some of my friends, most obviously Roberto, is so much a part of the Academy, and we speak very often, and he always mentions his attachment to this organization and how important it is for him and for his work and for his relationships with other artists. So for that reason, I am particularly privileged to be the interlocutor. He's the star. I'm just the person who's asking the questions or making some of the remarks. And so, anyway, I think that what I wanted to say about the show goes way beyond the excellence of both the choice of the artists, who were all wonderful, from Glenn Ligo to Shazia Sikander to Kay Walking Stick and so on and so forth, and in the other rooms surrounding Roberto's work, Teresita Fernandez, Faith Ringgold, Rafi Ferrer, who could ask for better company? So, and of course Roberto Juarez. So I think that it is very appropriate that we talk about Roberto within the larger framework of these extraordinary artists, but also, and I think more than anything, the exhibition that interrogates the nature of a nation is critical at this moment in time. One of the works makes the remark within the text of it that the United States is the only country of the Americas, and that's what I prefer to call my own field, arts of the Americas, rather than art of the Latin America and the Caribbean, because the Americas is everything from the northernmost part of Canada to the tip of Patagonia, and just before Antarctica begins. So the idea of what prompts this country, the United States, to call itself America is something, of course, I could talk about that for a very long time, as I do in many of my classes at the Institute of Fine Arts and at the Department of Art History, and write about it and so on and so forth. But this show illustrates it in, I think, a very brilliant way. And it illustrates it at a moment, at a critical moment, a moment that really forces us to question what is America and who belongs more than anything else. Why does one person belong and another person get thrown out? So the ideas, I don't think that I have to expound too much, and we're not here to do that on contemporary politics, but I will invoke contemporary politics and all of its ills, and all of its disappointments, and all of its negative aspects, to make even more significant the questionings that are going on in this exhibition. I have recommended it to so many people, and I hope that it will be a great draw for people of all ages and from many different places in the world. So anyway, I just wanted to make that point because I think that the presence of Roberto is a particularly apt one, because he represents a variety of identities that are questioned in this exhibition. Roberto is born in the United States. His father is Mexican. His mother is from Puerto Rico. Roberto is a queer artist. Roberto is an artist of color. Roberto is an artist who does not fit into the mold of the dominant white patriarchy. And he is a brilliant artist. All of these things make his presence extremely not only appropriate, but also necessary in the discourse and the narrative that this exhibition is attempting and does, I think, in a very positive way, evoke and provoke, because it's very thought-provoking and very provocative. And so I would like to ask Roberto just to summarize some of the ideas that you feel, being surrounded by all these artists, being within an exhibition which isn't just about wonderful works of art, but rather has very much of a subtle and also direct point of view.
I have my own. Yes. I feel honored to be part of this group, and it's exciting to see the different generations that are presented. That's, I think, one of the most interesting things to me. It's not just, these older artists who've been, at their studios for 50 years, which are still creating beautiful work that it looks like a young artist created. And so to see the different generations and to see the development of people's work together makes it really interesting to be part of. And also the mediums. There's all kinds of mediums in the show. It's a delicate watercolor as opposed to a neon pattern textured weaving. It's quite a range, and I think it's hung really beautiful. I mean, I love the wall I'm on with Carmen Herrera down the road from me. It's like, what an honor and what a genius, but at the same time, it lives together beautifully because of how it's hung.
And how would you articulate your presence in this exhibition that has so many agendas going on? Although there's one overall narrative, but it goes into so many different directions. We have somebody like Annabella Geiger, who's a wonderful artist from Brazil, questioning the identity of her own nation with maps of Brazil cut out in the center. We have Glenn Ligon, another country. Whose country and where is it? We have Kate Walkingstick, who is also looking at the landscape and saying whose landscape is it? To whom does it belong?
Well, my piece that's in the show was created as a group of paintings that I made to respond to a book called The Kingdom of This World by Carpentier, which was something I illustrated a long time ago. In 1987, I was asked to do etchings for this book. And they limited editions made this beautiful bound book of my etchings with the writing. And in that process of making these paintings about Haiti and the Caribbean, I created this painting about Puerto Rico. And the idea in the painting is to create an altar to the gods, to the spirit that connects all the Caribbean islands. And so that there is a kind of a communication between the Caribbean islands that isn't just landscape or geography, but there's spirituality, there is music, there is food, there is dance, and these things connect all these people. And I felt that I'm part of that, and to be able to celebrate that in a painting is what I was attempting to do.
So I think Roberto and I are going to go back and forth and make comments about the work for a little while. We're going to show a film that he made when he was an art student, and we have, I think, 5 or 6 images just to give you an idea of the breadth of his production. About this painting, which is in the exhibition, I wanted just to make a couple of remarks. I know the work quite well. I met Roberto many years ago in Columbia County, north of New York, where he has a house with his husband David, and I met them in 2009, something like that, after an exhibition that he had in Hudson, New York, at a gallery. And so I know the work quite well, and in the case of this work, just to sort of fill out a little bit about what Roberto just said, the novel, some of you may know that Roberto just cited, called The Kingdom of This World, or it was written in Spanish by Alejo Carpentier, who was a French-Cuban novelist. It was called originally El Reino de este Mundo, and it was about it is one of the foundational works of surrealist literature from the Caribbean, which was in the 1930s and 40s, Havana, Port-au-Prince, and San Juan, and also the capitals of Guadeloupe and Martinique were very important as centers of intellectual foment. And Carpentier was a representative of the Cuban variety of surrealism, but was writing about Haiti and the Haitian Revolution. And so to use the book and to use the background of the book and transform it into a sort of an ode to Puerto Rico, which is part of, and also San Juan was a significant place as well, in the intellectual life of the Caribbean in the 1930s and 40s, the 40s, 50s, at the time that Carpentier was writing this book. And so I think that the lyricism of it, and I'm going to ask you about color in just a couple of minutes, and the fact that it transcends and encompasses Cuba, Haiti, Puerto Rico, is in itself a questioning of who's America. The Caribbean is as much a part of the Americas as are the mainland nations. So shall we go to the next one?
Okay. So this is called Biblia, and it was painted for my second show in New York at the Robert Miller Gallery, and it's a portrait of my brother, who was a Southern Baptist minister and kept giving me Bibles. So this is a picture of him holding a Bible, but surrounded by palm fronds and a painting of roses. And it was love-hate. I mean, my brother was very harsh with me because I was a gay man and his religion didn't accept me, but I still loved him because he was my brother. So this is the painting I did. There's a lot of bright colors and kind of sharp shapes. So it's pretty, but it's harsh at the same time. And that's part of what I was trying to say about Rico, my brother.
But what you didn't mention is that you are a prominent presence in this photograph.
Oh,
it's a photograph of the painting. And Roberto, in his very handsome youth, is lounging in front of the painting and becomes, very interestingly in this photograph, which is a work of art unto itself, a part of this dialogue between brother and brother. And as I have 3 brothers and 5 sisters, I know the dynamics of families. Roberto mentioned Robert Miller. Robert Miller Gallery was an extremely important gallery for many, many years, And Roberto worked as a preparator first in the gallery, which was located at that time, where was it?
57th and 5th.
57th and 5th, and that, I think that was its only address, wasn't it?
No, it moved to Madison Avenue in 57,
Okay.
and then from there it moved to Chelsea.
So Roberto ultimately became a member of the so-called stable of the gallery, and here it's labeled East Village early 80s, and so he is very much a representative and showed with a large coterie of artists who came to maturity, if you want to say that, in the early 1980s, and it is a generation that had reverberations all over the U.S., Latin America, in Europe. There was, for example, just at the time this painting was done, a landmark exhibition at the Royal Academy in London called A New Spirit in Painting, which showed, and that was the first time that in Europe, the generation of the American and the European neo-expressionists, as they were called, came together. So Roberto was part of this group, and many other artists who are very well known today as well. I think perhaps the most apt comparison in this particular case might be with Jean-Michel Basquiat, who was a friend of Roberto's and a colleague within this group of artists who were showing together in various galleries in the early 1980s. Roberto, when do you think that this aspect of your career, the expressionistic use of the figure and color, was at its height? Would you look at it at this point in time? Because it was quite a long-standing facet of your work.
I think until I moved to Miami. And at a certain point, I took a studio in Miami, and the color kind of diffused out of the pictures. They became black and white, they became much more abstract, they became much more geometric. And in a way, it's responding to what's in front of me. I think, this is what I was craving when I was in New York, which is pretty gritty. And when I got to luscious Miami, I was doing black and white, Minbray pottery paintings. So it's a way of expressing things around me after they occur. So I just like to add the Stephen Barker with this photograph. It's a beautiful photograph. I still like it a lot. So again, in the early 80s, this started out as a self-portrait and ended up being the Puerto Rican flag, because the snake started to look like the stripes in the flag, and the stars that were supposed to be my chakras moving became the star of the Puerto Rican flag, and so it's called PR flag. And it's a work on paper.
And it's also something, a piece that I think is very appropriate because there is a renewed interest in Roberto's work of the 1980s. As a matter of fact, about 2 years ago, sometime during the pandemic, I drove, because I also lived part-time not very far from Roberto and David in Columbia County, and in my loneliness, I drove over to Canaan, New York, where they live and where the studio was. And Roberto was all excited, and he said he'd recently rediscovered a large cache of paintings on paper from the 1980s that he hadn't seen for years. And so we spent hours going through each of these paintings, and they were, I don't want to say radically different from what I had seen before, but they had a sense of the moment, of that 1980s expressionism, and also the sort of verve and the enthusiasm and the energy of a young artist who is just starting out his career. And the interest in this time period has grown and grown, and very recently, in the past 2 years, there have been several exhibitions of his work One in a gallery in Brescia, Italy, and another in Venice at the time of the 2024 Venice Biennale. There was an inclusion of of a group of these pieces from the 80s in the Magenta Plains Gallery, which is on Canal Street, booth in the Independent Art Fair approximately 9 or 10 months ago. There will be another exhibition of these 1980s work at Magenta Plains in September. And so I think it's a moment to celebrate another facet of Roberto's art that looks quite different from what we see here at the National Academy. But just also thinking about this as, in a way, an homage to Puerto Rico and a sort of reassessing his part of his background, part of his childhood, because as we'll see in just a few minutes, when we look at a short film, Puerto Rico was very important to him. His mother had been born there, his grandmother still lived there at the time of these paintings. And this is, when I saw it first, I thought this was so dramatic because it seems that the figure is becoming part of the Puerto Rican flag. And so, in a sense, it's a merging of an abstracted, not abstract, but abstracted self-portrait into the flag, and then it is surrounded by foliage, which is reminiscent of the verdant quality of this island in the tropics. And so I think it's particularly telling about a number of aspects of Roberto's personality that have to do with precisely the questions that are being asked with this exhibition.
Thank you. That's pretty amazing. So, a little later, during the AIDS pandemic that we had, I went back to memories of Peruvian pottery that I had seen as a student at UCLA, and always wanted to do something with it. And phone sex was a way of using this freeness of sexuality in pottery to make a painting about phone sex, which was very common at the time because people were afraid to actually have sex. And there is a Peruvian figure stroking himself while the phone is ringing, and I guess he's going to pick it up and have a great time.
What I don't think that you emphasize, you talk about more the aspect of the derivation from Moche pottery for the figure, which is very interesting. But it is also of particular interest to me that it is one of a number of works that you created during the AIDS crisis that directly, or in many cases indirectly, insinuate or illustrate, as in this case, questions that are related directly to that crisis moment. The first time I saw this, in that moment when we were looking in 2000, I think in 2020 rather, at all of these rediscovered 1980s pages, I was particularly drawn to this and a series of other similar works. And then I remember also very distinctly that 2 years ago, I had created or founded, or I don't know, I was the person who was responsible for creating what is called the Gender and Sexuality Forum at the Institute of Fine Arts, which is NYU's graduate school of art history and fine art conservation. And that was a forum to allow like-minded students to come together and have guest speakers and so on about issues relating to gender, sexuality, etc. And I thought one of the perfect activities that we could have is to visit Roberto in his studio on East 8th Street, and which is in a beautiful studio in a very spacious apartment on between what avenues A and B?
The B and C.
B and C, right near Thompson Square Park. And so 10 or 12 students and I went over to 8th Street and went through these paintings, and they were fascinated, and the conversation was very stimulating. And I think this is one, I mean, obviously it's an overt, one of the more direct representations of sexuality and a particular form of sexuality, if you wish, that was I guess a product in a sense of the AIDS crisis, and also it struck me a chord in my mind, so much so that in my latest book, which is called Latino New York, 1970 to 2001, that is just about to come out. I have a chapter on Latino artists. It's a memoir. It's written in the first person. I have a chapter on Latino artists in the AIDS crisis, and talk about all of my friends, living and dead, more dead than living, unfortunately, who were artists that represented, who were artists either from Latin America or Latino artists. The word Latinx did not exist at the time I was referring to, so I didn't use it. And I have a section devoted to Roberto and precisely these works that reflect his own reflections on the AIDS crisis, and I illustrate this painting in this book, which is about to be published by Yale University Press. So it has a very particular meaning, very special meaning to me. Do you have any more? Is this the last one?
No, is it?
Oh, there we go. Lovely.
Okay. So Ramona's Front Yard is the newest painting from 2020. James Casabier had a space in Pittsfield, which he called the archive space. He invited me to do paintings, again, during a new pandemic. And I was locked up upstate painting, and it was kind of dreary. It was kind of scary to go out shopping, all of it. We remember how dreary it was. And so I started thinking about my grandmother's front yard, which was something that brought a lot of joy and memories to me as a young artist going there. And so there was a large pig tied up to a mango tree in the front yard. And so I used this cutting board to print the pig as kind of groups of pigs moving around, and pineapple to signify the lush terrain that it was in on a hill over Juncos. And again, I think the Puerto Rican colors come up in the red, white, and blue, but it's also a kind of joy of life. And that's what I remember about my grandmother's house, was this joy of life, and a bigger life than I knew in the Chicagoland area where I grew up. So I'm going to just put it this, and this is Ramona and me on the front porch.
Let me also just, can you go back to the painting?
Yes.
Because this is, for us in the, looking at the exhibition, this is the style of painting that is, I would say, almost abstract, semi-abstract, abstracted, that is representative of what Roberto's work here in the exhibition is. And he mentioned James Casabier, who's a friend, an artist himself, and the exhibition where this picture was shown in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. It was in a large building that, I don't know what it had been before. It was a very
Store, I think.
a very large store in a, and I went to see, I went with my husband to see this exhibition with Roberto and with James on a very, very rainy, dreary day during the pandemic. And Pittsfield, Massachusetts, sorry to say this, is a rather dreary place. And if any of you are from Pittsfield, please forgive me. But so we walked in, and it was like being surrounded by light and by a sense of relief from the solitude of COVID pandemic, and and the visitor was transported, almost quite literally, because it was the space was very large, and the paintings, there were many of them, I don't remember how many were in the show, but it seemed like a great many, and they were all of a piece. They were all reminiscent of this, not a view of what Roberto remembered from his times visiting his grandmother in Puerto Rico, but his imagined view of the essence of, and I use that term, it's a sort of problematic term, but I like it anyway, because of the essence, the idea, the taste, the remembered dream that you have maybe just before you fall asleep and things begin to weave together in strange ways. And this is so much what I think of Roberto's work in general, and this series of Puerto Rican reminiscences, I think, are very representative, and that is what the painting in the other room comes from. And so we had this short film.
I was a film student at the San Francisco Art Institute. It's the first time I had moved away from home permanently, and it was a kind of, I miss you, Mom, kind of thing. And just recently, when she passed away, I revisited the film and put some music to it because I wanted to present it to the family. And that's when Fabio saw it and decided it should go to Venice. And we showed it in Venice, and the response was really interesting. Anyway, we'll play it.
Desde que se fue, nunca más volvió. Seguiré sus pasos, caminito adiós.
Caminito que todas las tardes feliz recorría cantando mi amor.
No le digas si vuelve a pasar que mi llanto tu suelo regó. Caminito cubierto de cardos, la mano del tiempo tu huella borró. Y a tu lado quisiera caer y que el tiempo nos mate a los dos. Desde que se fue, nunca más volvió. Seguiré sus pasos, caminito adiós.
Was that a film that you had sort of discovered, or have you remembered that you had done it all the while?
I remember having done it, and the fact that she passed away made me go revisit it and prepare to show it to the family.
I was particularly struck, I'd seen it before, but I was particularly struck now by the fact that it is a sort of a mixture of assemblage of so many different elements, like a collage that is, of course, it looks very different from your paintings, but the idea of putting unrelated elements together ties it into your interest in surrealism, where you did that series of illustrations for the Kingdom of this World, from which this painting in the other room derives. And even in 1976, when you made the film, you were putting seemingly unrelated things together. I wanted to ask you, one of the particular elements, this isn't a film class, but one thing I did wanted to remark on is that there are these tensions in that film. Like there's the coldness of the winter, and then the sweetness of the cheap lithographs of religious subjects, and a few snippets that I think were taken in Puerto Rico. And so the cold and the heat and the warmth and the sort of isolation are all part of that film. And even though there are no elements in that film that carry through into your painting, I think that you were, even as a very young artist, interested in these juxtapositions. The one thing I do want to ask you about that film, what is the digging of mud? Talk about that for a moment.
That's in Lower Manhattan. It was one of my first visits to New York, in Tribeca, and they were just repairing a road, and I was fascinated by how the cement was moving in and how they did it. But then I think it's a metaphor for the film about emotion. Emotion becomes hard after time. And so that was part of the thinking, but a lot of, I think, what ends up becoming my painting, I learned through filmmaking. Because in filmmaking, you know, you deal with images, and I particularly liked optical printing, where you could take a cell of a film and blow it up or move it or slow it down. All those things became part of what I thought was my vocabulary that I use in my paintings. And I mean, even how they're cut, I mean, how images are a different scale is something I think I learned from filmmaking. And the time-based element of film really helps me for painting too, because there's only so much time and so much canvas. It just helps you to think and organize yourself. So it was good education.
So
Good education.
we want to give the audience some time for questions or conversation, but there is one thing I would like, if you wouldn't mind to talk about, because I know that you went on family trips in the summer from Chicago to Mexico, and then you had also made reference to your trips to Puerto Rico, and I wondered how these real contacts with the places where your parents had come from formed your identity, or how that led into this tripartite identity that I think I referred to earlier as an American or a U.S. person with very deep roots in two very different cultures, Mexico and Puerto Rico.
Well, it comes back to my brother. Both of my brothers were in the Vietnam War, and because of that, we would do these trips almost yearly to Mexico to pray for my brothers. They would come back alive. And so there was that connection. And it's another world. When you come from white bread, Romeoville, Illinois, or Chicago even, you know, the cold, harsh winters, to be in Mexico and to see the life of color there that exists in a different way, I think completely fed me and turned me on to how to use color. Also, architecture. I'm fascinated with architecture. In the group of drawings from the 80s, there's a number of drawings of churches that I had seen in Mexico, and not from a photograph or actually a drawing I did then, but from my memory of what those churches are. And still, I mean, I find architecture in churches very stimulating for painting.
And you went to a very specific shrine, I think, in central Mexico.
San Juan de los Lagos.
San Juan de los Lagos, which is actually a place where several important Mexican artists like Maria Izquierdo was from there. And vis-a-vis color, the last thing I want to ask you is, I know when you were in school, I think in high school, your class made a class trip to the Art Institute of Chicago, and there you bought a book that was seminal for your development of color. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
It was a sale catalog for $1 of Van Gogh's sunflower paintings, and we never had art books at home, so the fact I could take that home and remember the experience I had of looking at these paintings really changed my life. I mean, I realized that this was something I was going to be doing for the rest of my life.
So with that, I think, do we have until 7:15? Is that
What is it?
yes? Okay. So it is now just 7. We can have some questions, or I can continue talking. Talk. Yeah, please.
Roberto, I noticed that the medium line is mixed media in the images we saw in this work. Can you elaborate more on what the medium line is and what makes them mixed media, I guess?
Well, in the last, 20 years, I've been using a lot of Japanese paper and now Chinese paper, because I've traveled to China 4 times. And that's part of what you see is kind of draping over the color. It's acrylic paint, and I draw a lot on my paintings, so there's usually pastel or oil stick. But the new adventure for me is just painting without applying anything. So my new paintings are all paint, and I think it's such an amazing experience now because I've been doing this for so long. But the idea of layering paint and paper is a way to have dialogues between different surfaces and to say different things between layers. And it makes it somehow richer for me. That's why I've used it. Yeah.
Yeah, so sort of building off of that question, Roberto, the Ramona's front yard, the scale of that painting, is that 16 by 16?
No, it says 16 by 16 feet.
Yeah, because it said
Yeah.
92 inches by 192 inches. Was that right?
It's meant to be 8 feet by
8
8 feet.
feet by
Okay. Because that's an extraordinary large painting.
I do like,
Well, and that's, my question was mainly about scale.
yeah, I love making very, very large paintings, architectural scale paintings, and I've done a lot of courthouses and hospitals and police stations, high schools. I've done public work where it's really large. 22 feet is not a small amount of space, but I love to paint like that.
Yeah.
And actually, one thing, I'll just give pardon me for 1 moment to make another point about your work that we didn't talk about, and that is your public art, your murals, and anyone in this room can see one of Roberto's murals at Grand Central Station. There is a waiting room in Grand Central Station. So it's sort of hard to find. It's one of
The
those,
station master's waiting room. It's where the women's bathroom is on the main floor.
but it is, my point is not so much that, but rather it is painted in a way that makes all of this, these ideas about color and form. There are many floral forms in it, and it creates immediately as you walk into this room a place of rest, a place of repose, and a place to separate yourself quite distinctly from the chaos that's going around you as you are making your way through Grand Central Station. And then there is, as I think you mentioned in your very nice introduction, in the Miami airport, and also what I think is most beautiful, although I've not seen it in person, are several very large murals that you did for courthouses, especially for Children's Courthouse in Florida.
It's in Miami.
In Miami, which is a place that, can you imagine anything more scary or scary for a child than to be brought into a courthouse? And I've seen, films of you making it and photographs of it and so on, and it is a very interesting experiment and successful in transforming into this large, even larger format than is possible in your paintings.
It's 4 floors. It's 4 floors.
It's huge, yes. I'm sorry, sir, I cut you off. Or I didn't.
No, you didn't cut me off. Yeah, having seen that film after a number of years, you said, do you see yourself at a certain point going back and experimenting with film?
I have, actually. After such a positive response, I pulled out a lot of, mostly video that I've shot. There's hundreds of videos. And I've started to look at it and work with this young musician, my nephew, Norman Morgan, who I think did incredible sound with it. And so, that's, I am.
Yeah. And did you make another one after that one, or that's the only one that you made?
No, there's four very different films from that era.
Yeah.
That one is about Arch Connolly, the artist. It's a portrait of Arch Connolly. Another is a portrait of my roommate, Dolores Deluxe, at the time. It was in Venice Beach, and when I went to UCLA, I lived with her, and so I filmed her and her daughter. It's called Viva Dolores. And there's a couple others.
Yeah, well, this one is quite beautiful and very haunting. So I applaud you for that.
Thank you.
Would you, if you did further videos, you would be more attuned now to the color, because obviously that was in black and white. And
Well, there are some colored films too.
Okay.
I'm going to bring you back into time because you showed the drawing of paper, right, of the 80s. But there was a period in that space, in that time, in the 80s, where you were exhibited at Robert Miller, where you took not radical, but you took a very sharp turn into something new. And that's my favorite part of your body of work. And it was on paper, maybe Japanese, I don't know, but it was kind of paper. But you were representing the underworld, or flora, or whatever, especially flora. It was like everything was underwater. And I want you to elaborate on that, because that was always very intriguing to me.
Well, just to clarify what you're saying, what changed? What?
It was a change from the
bright
images, the graphic images of figures, etc. It was no longer any human. I mean, it was not abstract,
Right.
but you were representing an underworld, mostly of flora, of flowers coming up, but with a very muddy color-like background.
Yeah, peat moss. I started
You know what I
putting
mean?
peat
Yeah,
moss.
I love that.
Yeah, there's a period where I
So talk
put
about that.
peat moss on the canvas so that the paper, once it went on, it got very brown. And it was like kind of memory, and it was much darker. There was hardly any color. And
Yeah.
I think, I don't know, and then from there I went to this period where I just did this very clear geometry. It's like, as an artist, you need to breathe. You know, you can make, and then you just want to breathe a little bit and just, exist and make something that's not what's expected and what you are trying to do, and just breathe. And I think that's kind of what I do with my different eras. There's breathing, and then I get back into the race and I run.
I mean, what fascinated me was the fact that you were looking for an underworld, that was not necessarily scary,
Right.
but that was what was very interesting, I remember.
And
Again,
more delicate.
Huh?
More delicate and poetic.
But also the fact that you are searching for roots or something.
Mm-hmm.
That's the idea. That's what I felt when I saw it. I mean, that was 20 million years ago, but I mean, it's not here, I know, but it's something to explore. It's a beautiful part of your work.
We were lucky enough to have Roberto here discussing his portrait at the Grand Central Terminal, and I'm interested in learning more about your relationship with the flora and fauna and nature as we're seeing here in Puerto Rico, and what is so present in your mural there, especially in relationship to the architecture that you were inspired by.
Well, in that case, it was I was traveling. I actually spent a year in Rome at the Rome Academy, and I was looking at a lot of cathedrals. And in every cathedral, there was cloister, and the cloister was a more meditative kind of internal space where the monks could go and pray. And I thought, as we all do, that Grand Central was the cathedral of travel, and I had a little cloister to fill. And so that was my intention, to create that kind of space. And it makes me happy to know that you felt that there. The idea of plants to me aren't literal. It's not like I'm illustrating flowers or plants. To me, a plant is a life form that is a unit that is growing like we are growing, like our cells are growing. It's a way to describe something that's very hard to describe, but that we're all part of.
And Roberto, how did you get that commission for Grand Central Station?
It was a battle. There was a lot of artists that wanted it, and there was a tie between me and another artist who was a very famous artist, and they argued and discussed, and finally they brought Alex Katz in to decide who could get this commission, and Alex said, give the kid a chance.
But who was they?
It was the MTA has a board of artists and professionals who help, and I've actually had sat on boards and selected artists for very big projects after that.
Mm-hmm. Good. Well, any other comments or questions before we finish? Well, thank you so much for listening, for being here.
And coming out on a rainy day, but it didn't clear up, and I'm so happy you're here. Thank you.
Yeah.